I have Rosemary on the show. Rosemary is a woman awakened, a mother of two girls, and a folk herbalist in training. The trauma of her unnecessary C section brought her to her free birth. Hi, Rosemary.
Hi.
You have two girls. How old are they?
My first Chloe is 3, and my second Amelie, she's a year and a half now.
Awesome. So,
Mhm.
wherever you'd like to start.
Well, I mean, I'm here to share the story of my free birth, but I always say that it happened. The gift was given to me because I had a C-section with my first daughter. I'll tell you about the end of pregnancy. I had a midwife, and at they risk out of your care at 42 weeks of pregnancy. So as that deadline came, I did all sorts of things to try and induce myself. Black and blue cohosh tinctures, nipple stimulation. I think I had 7 or 8 acupuncture appointments. I saw an osteopath. I asked my baby to come. I can't remember what else I did, but it was just this like really panicked end of pregnancy. Oh yeah, I had 2 of those non-stress tests, just basically just like monitoring of the baby and an ultrasound. And although there was nothing wrong, like I didn't have not enough fluid, or they didn't have anything bad to say about my placenta, or nothing was wrong except a clock that I was supposed to be birthing according to. And I was really like, I wanted a home birth. I wanted to birth in home. And actually what I really wanted was to birth among sisters. Like I didn't really want a midwife, but I was in a new city and I didn't have my community of women here, so that wasn't an option for me. And even though I desperately searched during my pregnancy to find that here, I came up empty handed. So I just had the regulated midwife. And once I hit 42 weeks, I think I convinced them to give me an extra 3 days or something, because my calculation versus my first ultrasound calculation were different by 3 days. And then they transferred my care to a hospital here in Montreal. Um, and they gave me over to an obstetrician. And that was the last thing I wanted. I actually tried to take my chart and go to a different hospital that I heard was more naturally minded, but they refused me. They said, "We'll take you if you agree to be induced right now." And otherwise, like, we won't take you. And so I was like, "Well, what do you do if I show up in labor?" And they were like, "Well, then we'll take care of you." But they didn't, because I did eventually show up in labor, and they told me they were going to put me uh, an ambulance and send me to the other hospital. And the reason I particularly was not interested in this hospital was because it has the highest C-section rate in the city, and they handle all of the high risk cases. And that's just not an environment that I was interested in being in. So I managed to labor at home for over 24 hours before I was transferred, before I transferred. And the reason I transferred was because I was like vomiting black every contraction. And I had been vomiting the whole time I was pregnant, like every single day for the full 43 weeks. Oh, yeah, I missed that. I did go into labor naturally at 43 weeks. I didn't let myself be induced. So that was great. And yeah, and when I went to the hospital, I was really scared. And but all of the people who tended to me for the first many, many hours were women, and they were very kind. And nobody gave me attitude about not being induced and being 43 weeks. And but it's still the hospital. And so what happens when you go to the hospital is you take drugs, and then you take more drugs, and then you take more drugs. They don't respect your birth plan. I had a very detailed birth plan with me that said, don't give me drugs, don't ask me about drugs. And then I also had some like I don't consent tos. And I remember one of my nurses coming in and saying, listen, I know you have this birth plan, but the doctors don't actually read this. So you're going to have to verbal to the doctor who comes in during delivery the things that you don't consent to. And on my list was episiotomy and forceps, monitoring the baby's scalp, like through that little spiral they put into the scalp.
Yeah.
I didn't consent to that. And a vacuum. That was the other one. So when it was time for me to have my baby, and I was, fully dilated and things had progressed to the point where it was like, cool, baby's coming. I this woman doctor came in, and she had actually come in and broken my waters many hours earlier. And she didn't look me in the eye, and she didn't speak to me. And just suddenly she had like a skewer in her hand. And so I didn't like her very much. And so she was the one that came in. I guess she was the resident on call or on my case. And she came in and she was going to be my delivering doctor. And right away I was like, no, not you. I'm sorry. You didn't make me feel safe. Like, you need to leave. Goodbye.
And at this time, who's in the room with you? Who's your support?
My mother and my partner, Luke.
Okay.
And they were with me like for the weeks leading up to my birth. The whole time I was laboring at home. And actually, they were my birth team for my second birth too. So
Awesome.
they're my people.
So let's backtrack a little bit. You did not want to get induced at that time. Why didn't you want to get an induction?
Because it just felt totally unnecessary. Like, there was no problem. If there was a problem, okay, I would have considered it, but it just seemed to be like this thing that they all wanted to do. And I already understood some of the hormonal matrix of labor and birth and postpartum. And I wasn't interested in messing with that for no reason other than it's what like doctors wanted me to do because they had a schedule. I knew all about the schedule. And I also knew how amazing natural birth is and how wise the body is. And there seemed to be absolutely no reason to mess with that. So I wasn't interested. We had this one meeting with this doctor who I sat in the room. It was after an ultrasound and a baby monitoring session. And he like took a big deep breath in. And then I don't think he stopped speaking for like 20 minutes. And he said things like, if you were my wife, you would have been induced 2 weeks ago. You're going to kill your baby. I can't believe you're letting your partner do this, like to Luke. And he just like, it was just like this cascade of fear mongering. And he prefaced it with, you don't have to listen to anything I say. And then he like went on to do all of these things. And I remember watching Luke's face just like turn to horror as the minutes went by. And that meeting just like destroyed me. I was so distraught. I was just like, how could he just say all of those things to a woman at this stage in her labor? And still, like, none of it seemed concrete. The only reason they were happening was because I was at 43 weeks or nearing 43 weeks.
Oh my God. So rude.
It just broke me. It didn't really, yes, it made me angry, but I was just so raw and open that I just like, I would cry and then I would go swim in the river and try to like build myself back up again. It was just a horrible end of pregnancy on an emotional level.
So you're in the hospital. You don't want to go with that doctor. And do you get a new doctor?
Yeah. I do. I get her boss.
Okay.
So they bring in the big guns. And he's this like older gentleman, and he comes in, and I think one of the first comments I had said when it was time to push, I had said, cool, I want Luke behind me. I want to sit up. I want my knees elevated. Like I had decided what felt good and how I wanted to birth. And I think one of the first things he said was, well, you're supposed to be on your back. Like your husband needs to remove himself from behind you. And I was just kind of like, okay, like whatever. Because that was really all I could come up with was okay, whatever at that stage in the game. Because like I'm about to birth my baby. I'm like, I think I'm within the hour, at least, labor was we're 36 hours deep at that point, so I'm within the hour. And then he like puts his fingers inside of my vagina without asking my permission, which hadn't happened with any of the other doctors who had come in and put their fingers inside my vagina. And he hurt me, like he made it was painful, and I think I cried out. And then he announced the position, the height and position of my baby. And the information he gave was that like I don't know if it's like minus or plus below, like there's a pelvic line and then they use a minus or plus. But I'm going to say like 15 minutes earlier, a different doctor had been in my room, and she had stated that my baby was like below my pelvis by 2, I think. But he stated that my baby was above my pelvis by 1, and that her positioning was, I don't know, whatever, some pathologized position. And then he said, "Oh no, you're -1 or +1 or whatever he says, and you're 43 weeks, and there's meconium in your fluid, and you're having a C-section." He just announced that I was having a C-section, basically. That was like it. And I remember in my mind thinking like, this is my worst nightmare come true. This is the thing that I like never wanted to touch with at all, ever. And what came out of my mouth was, "I'm scared." And he said, "I'm scared too." And I was just like, okay, so like, I guess this is happening. And seconds later, they were shoving documents in my face. So the room seemed very like panicked and hurried at this moment. But as soon as they got my signature on that document, and I have to tell you, I make people like, I read everything I sign. That is one of my life practices. And yet in this moment, all I did was just listen to him say, "This is blah, blah, blah. This is blah, blah, blah. This is blah, blah, blah." And I scribbled something looking like my signature. And then after they got the signature, things were chill suddenly. There was like no rush anymore. And then, I'm separated from my family. I'm taken to the operating room. Eventually, Luke shows up in whatever he's wearing. I remember arguing with them about how much time I was going to get with my baby, because it was now after 7 p.m. And after 7 p.m., they don't staff recovery on the same floor as they staff the baby staff. So you're separated. And I knew it was after 7 p.m. So I knew they were going to separate us. So I argued with them and about like how much time I was going to get with my baby. Because again, I knew you need to latch, you need to breastfeed, like you need to connect, you need to eye gaze, you need to do all those things. So she was, in my chart I later read, she was pushed back into my womb so that they could extract her from the incision that they made, because she was too far down in my pelvis. And as soon as she came out, she was taken to the other side of the room. I heard her cry, and Luke was next to me, and I was like, "Go be with her. Like, don't stand here. She's alone over there. Go be with her. She needs a parent." And he did, and she was fine. I had also requested that they not clamp the cord because I wanted that pulsation to finish. And he was like, "Oh, that's standard practice." But again, read in my chart, even though patient requested delayed cord clamping, we did not do this. So she didn't get any of that like good, healthy blood, which still haunts me to this day. Truthfully, every time she's sick, every time something's wrong with her, I'm like, I beat myself up about it. It's so funny. I haven't cried about it in a really long time, but I've been going through my chart in preparation for talking to you, and it's just bringing it all up. It's bringing up the pain. So eventually she came over to me, and she was put on my chest, and I'm laying flat on my back because that's how C-sections go. And if you ever put a newborn on your chest for the first time ever and you're on your back, it's really awkward and uncomfortable. But we latched and we were separated, and she was with my mother, and my sister had come at this point, and my partner. And I had I had pumped colostrum trying to induce labor, so she was given my colostrum and not formula, which made me feel good and made me feel okay. And she was given it in like a little spoon or a cup or something, and she did her eye gazing with her father and her grandmother, but not her mother. So,
Mhm.
needless to say, I was completely traumatized by that experience.
Mm.
It took I was just a sobbing mess for months and months and months. And I would just like hold her and cry, and holding her made me feel better. She was 9 pounds, 3 ounces. She was a huge baby. And she was amazing. She was still perfect, and we breastfed, and I was really well tended to in my postpartum. I had my mother there for a bit, and then I had Luke's mother there for a bit. And I just rested and tried to heal. And when she was 11 months old, I got pregnant again.
Mm.
And I thought I was like one and done. I was like, this was so brutal. Like, I'm never doing this again. But I got pregnant. And so I was like, okay, here we go. I'm doing this again. So that meant that right away, I knew I'm not engaging with the system. Like, we're done here, full tilt. It's also the middle of COVID. It's also the middle of the pandemic. I'm not sure what kind of words I'm allowed to use. You're going to have to figure that out.
Those are fine.
And I knew what was going on with women in the hospitals. Like, they're laboring in masks, and their partners are not allowed in some hospitals. And then sometimes their partners are allowed. And then sometimes one other person is allowed, but sometimes they're not. And everybody's tested. And what if you test positive and your baby gets taken away? And I was just like, well, I can't do any of that. None of that is for me. So I embarked on a wild pregnancy towards a free birth. I'm just going to share some of the things that were written in my chart. I received my chart 6 months after I had Chloe, because they were present in my mind, and they were what I had to contend with first and foremost for my own mental state of being able to walk into a free birth. It should be noted that I do not believe this patient is a candidate for a VBAC under any circumstances. On examination, she has an extremely prominent cervix with a prominent sacral promontory with an obstetrical conjugate of less than 10 centimeters. There's also another place in my chart where it's written that I have a contracted pelvis. And I remember my doctor saying, well, thank God we did that. She was never going to come out.
Wow.
So I had to wrap my head around that stuff, and I had to contend with that. Like, is my body broken? Is my pelvis the wrong shape? And then I also had to contend with what is uterine rupture about, right? Because that's like the biggest thing. It's like uterine ruptures feels like the biggest thing that you are afraid of after a VBAC. And so I just tried to educate myself on it. I had seen an osteopath a few times to have my scar worked on. And she did a beautiful job, and she would work on the different layers, and she would pull my scar apart. And this was, within, I think, a month. And so I had worked on it early, and then I had continued to work on it for months after, when I could bring myself to touch it and look at it. And I really tried to not shy away from that. I tried to force myself to do it, even though I didn't want to do it, because I knew that I needed to heal. I needed to heal this space. So physically and mentally, I needed to heal. And the work of pregnancy was that. It was, how can I get my mind in the right place to have this free birth and to be confident and to be sure that this is what I'm doing? But also, how can I be safe? How can I understand what could possibly go wrong, how to recognize it, and then decide what my plan is and make sure my birth team is on board with that? So I did a lot of that. So I did a lot of like fear clearing and research, and birth, there's like so much to know. that it didn't matter that I had already spent my whole pregnancy with Chloe researching and then my whole postpartum. Still, by the time I had Amelie, like I could learn another 10 years. There's just like infinite amounts of things that you can learn, but you have to just be where you are. So where I was I learned that uterine rupture is often caused by the use of Pitocin, because it will force the uterus into contracting in ways that it wouldn't normally or naturally contract given its own hormonal cocktail. So I was like, great, no problems there. No one's giving me Pitocin at home. Yeah. And that really helped. And then I just learned that the signs of uterine rupture would be like probably excessive bleeding, probably a very strangely shaped uterus or belly, and new sounds, new screams, new pains, new sounds that were like very out of the ordinary for the what noises I would have been making up until that point. So I had a little like list that I had written out of reasons to transfer. Uterine rupture was one of them. And I had it on the wall. And I went over it with Luke and I went over it with my mother. And all through my pregnancy, Luke and I were, researching together and talking about these things. And he's like, chill. He was 100% on board right away. No issues.
That's
Women
beautiful.
know how to birth. This is your lane. He knew how traumatized I was from the first experience. And he just trusted me and trusted birth. And that was it. He didn't really need to do anything to wrap his head around it. Like that's his vibe.
That's awesome. And did you know any other close women in your life that had a VBAC at that time?
Yeah, so my sister had a VBAC while I was pregnant, I think, or maybe just before I got pregnant. And she had a VBAC with a midwife. And so she was terrified about what I was doing. I didn't keep it a secret. I told everybody in my life, because I'm very practiced at that. I'm practiced at like being who I am and being loud about it and not really caring what people have to say. So I told all my family. I have 4 sisters and 3 brothers. So I have a big family and we're all like,
oh yeah,
up in each other's grill all the time. And we're close. We're very close. When you grow up with that many, you're close. So I told them all. So I had to contend with each of their experiences of hearing what I was going to do. And my sister who had the VBAC, she had a successful VBAC. And she had a lot of fear and she was reaching out to her midwife. This is what happens. People in your life, they reach out to other people in their life to hear about what could possibly go wrong. And then they want to talk to you about it to make sure that, first of all, you know about it because they love you. And second of all, they're terrified and they want to not be terrified. They don't want to sit in that fear. So they really want you to walk them to a place where they're not fearful anymore. And I was very open to having those conversations and doing that with most people for my first trimester. But as my pregnancy went on, I knew that I needed to be very single-mindedly focused on what my goal was. And I had already rode the roller coaster of like letting people come into your sphere at the end of pregnancy and make you fearful. And then that devastation of that, and then having to build yourself back up after that. I had done that with my pregnancy with Chloe, and I wasn't interested in that with my pregnancy with Amelie. So during my second and third trimester, I held incredibly strong boundaries with all of my family and anyone else in my life. And basically the deal was, this is what I'm doing. I'm not worried about how you feel about it, and I'm not going to make you feel better. And don't call me and start to like plant seeds of fear in my life. We're not doing that. And that meant that like I had to have this like big mama energy. It was like a very like protective lioness situation. And it was hard for a lot of people. So what actually ended up happening in my family is that they went to my mother because they couldn't go to me because they knew that she was going to be at my birth. So unfortunately, she had to go through that experience of letting people plant the seeds of fear, allowing it to devastate you, and then trying to find a way through it. And she also didn't want to then transfer it onto me, because she knew that her role was just to love me and support me. And we had like lots of Zoom calls and conversations about like what I was asking her to do there. Witness me, hold me. I wasn't asking her to learn about birth. I wasn't asking her to be a savior. I wasn't asking her to stand in as a midwife. I wasn't asking her to do any of those things. And so she would come to me periodically with different fears or questions or whatever, and we would have to work through those. And I feel really bad that she had to go through that, because I know what that feels like. And I know it was really hard for her, but she kind of kept me in the dark that that was happening until after I had had my baby. I think as a kindness to me, and also because since her and I had talked so much, she understood my boundaries. She got them. Like, um, but still, I was very open to processing her fears with her, because what I wanted in my birth space was not somebody who was terrified and tense. I wanted somebody who felt okay about being there.
Yeah,
And
totally. That's funny because my siblings, my sister was doing that through my mom too. And yeah, that's very interesting.
yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Wherever they can, right?
Mm-hmm.
But it comes from love. It only comes from love. Like, they're not trying to destroy you. They're trying to love you.
Yeah, yeah.
Um, but there's just so much unlearning that has to happen before you can be in a place like this. And that's a real process, and it takes a real dedication to do it in the small time frame of 9 months.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And none of them are doing it.
Yeah.
You're doing it. Maybe some
Yeah.
of them might have a little bit of time to do some of it, but that's just the way it's kind of got to be. So I went 43 weeks, almost, I think 42 and 5. The end of my pregnancy was the best. I just like took a lot of naps and ate tons of good food. It was springtime. I had her in April, springtime here. Prepared my house and mothered my toddler. My mother was with us also for I think the last 2 weeks of my pregnancy. I asked her to come at 41 weeks. That's what it was. And so I had help with my toddler, which was incredible. And like, she's such a great grandma. Luke had, I think, taken off work at the 42-week mark. So they were here full time, and life was just sweet. It was so sweet. And I had no expectations about anything. I just knew that every moment that went by, I was closer to meeting my baby. I was closer to my birthing time. And I wasn't stressed out about it. I had done the work. I was like home stretch. Yeah, so that's all of pregnancy. Anything I missed or that you want to hear about?
No, let's get into it. Because I
Okay,
know I
cool.
saw some footage, but I want to hear you speak about what was happening.
Yeah, okay. So I woke up at like 5 in the morning that morning, and the same thing had happened to me when I had Chloe. I woke up at 5 and I was like, "Oh, today's the day. I better eat something." I'm like super food focused in my life. I'm a professional cook, and food is like my life. So, of course, first thing I do, better eat something. Also, I was like afraid that I would be vomiting everything all the time. So, but this pregnancy, I was only sick for the first half, I think. Yeah. So I ate something and brushed my teeth and was like hanging out alone before anyone else is awake. And then I had this like big sensation that felt really different. I'd been having like tightenings for a while. Um, and I was like, oh yeah, that's very different. Like, today could be the day. So my mom was sleeping at my sister's place. She lives not too far away. So I texted them both and I said, hey guys, um, I might be in labor. Nobody panic. But I just want to let you both know, keep your phones close, keep your day clear. My sister had agreed to take my toddler if I needed. I hadn't decided, do I want her there? Do I want her not there? I thought I wanted her there, but maybe during labor I would be like, get her out of here. So my sister was on call for that job. So my mother, of course, course, like rushed over. And it was just like a really regular day. We were all kind of waiting. And every hour I would have this like big sensation that would kind of make me stop and drop to my knees or breathe. And then it would pass and then time would go by. Luke had a really busy day scheduled. He was like renting a truck and picking up a piece of furniture and and that was happening at 1 o'clock in the afternoon. And I was like, well, you might have to cancel, but we'll see how the day goes. And but he ended up doing that. And again, normal day. I was just eating like I think I ate like 6 meals that day or 5 meals. I was so ravenous. I was just so ravenous wolf. And I had time this day, both I had 2 friends coming over. One of them was coming over to take Chloe to the park. They have a daughter her age, and the other one was coming over to, like, prepare my space for me, to just, like, help me. She's a doula, and she's a friend, and her daughter's close to Chloe's age as well. And so like, this isn't a regular occurrence in my life. My friends don't, like, come over and do these things for me, but it just so happened that we were scheduled for that to happen on that day, and that was the day I was in labor, so I had
Perfect
someone, like
timing.
oh my god, perfect timing. I had, like, my floors swept and my house organized and my daughter at the park, and I just had time to, like, let labor come, and I made little birth affirmation cards and put them around my house, and we blew up the birthing pool. We had rented one, and um that was it. I just let it happen. And it wasn't until like nightfall when the sun went down, and the sun goes down, I think it was like 9ish. And my toddler went to bed and my mom went to bed and Luke went to bed, and set up this, like, actually right where I'm sitting now beside my bed. I set up a little like laboring spot for myself, and I had a ball and I had candles and had like 3 elixir drinks, just like hydration and salt and sweet. I had like a little something to pee in. I had a yoga mat on the floor. I had like 14 pillows. Pregnancy is all about the pillows.
That's so funny. I did the same thing next to my bed. Like, I brought all the pillows down. Yep.
Amazing. Oh my gosh. And I had a heating pad, and I remember just thinking like, "Oh, every woman should labor like this. This is like the best." Because I was totally alone, except my man was laying on the bed right next to me trying to sleep. It was dark and quiet, and it was just like beautiful. And that's when labor really started to like pick up. And my only focus as I labored was to relax between contractions. I think a focus of my labor first time around, I had wanted to speed things up, right? Because the whole narrative was speed things up. Everything's taking too long. But this time around, I was like, we're not speeding anything up. This is just gonna happen. And all I need to do is relax. So that was my only focus. Like, let the contraction happen and like don't get, tense, and but just like drop in and think
Mm.
about opening. And then as soon as I went over the top of the contraction, like the hardest part, I would immediately be like, relax, 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 relax. Just let yourself relax. I had all these little like mantras that I was saying, not intentionally. They were just coming out of my mouth. Open, open, relax, relax. That's good. That's good. Whatever. I got in the tub at one point. So I brought the candles. Luke brought the candles to the tub. I got in like our regular bathtub for a bit. I came back in the bed. And then I was like, okay, this is getting crazy. And I want to get in the birth pool and I want my mama. So I told Luke those 2 things, and I was laying in the bed, and he said, okay. So he left the room, and shortly after my mom came in, and it's like pitch black, and I just feel her hands grab my hands. And like, I have a big thing about my mother's and my grandmother's hands, these like, wrinkly, like strong, they've like cut so many apples and
Yeah.
it's just like, that moment was
Aw.
delicious. And I was like, oh, she's here, my mama. And she said, hi, Rosie, I'm here. And I was like, okay, great. And I was so happy to have her there. She hadn't slept a wink. She was just like praying in the next room bed, hoping things went well. And I threw up for the first time right then, all over the bed. And I was like, I need a bucket. So she got me a bucket and I threw up a second time. And so she tells me that was around 2 a.m. And shortly after, I was like, what's happening with the birth pool? Can I get in yet? Because Luke had been filling it up in the other room. She's like, let me go check. So she checks, and then I get in the tub. And then I just like, again, I love the hot water. I'm like a huge water person. It's October in Montreal, and I was in the river like 2 days ago. I'm a water person and a water sign. I'm a Cancer. So I got in the water. The water is my happy place, and it felt so good to be in there. But labor didn't slow down at all. It was just a really nice feeling to be in the water. And I just let the contractions come, and I focused on that. As soon as the peak goes over, just relax and open. And I moved around the tub, and I asked for sips of water and maybe lip chap. And I had a little like drum playlist on the go. And my mother was by my side, and Luke was by my other side. And shortly after I got in the tub, I felt like a gush into the pool, and my water broke. And I was like, wow, cool. Like, I think my water just broke. And because I had never experienced that with my first, they had broken it. So that was super cool. And my mother says that after my water broke, my sounds changed. They changed to like a grunting, and she calls it a bearing down.
Uh-huh.
And that continued and continued, and my eyes were closed. Like I didn't have my eyes open. I didn't really know what was happening, but I was never not there. I was so present. I was in the room. They talk about women going places. I didn't go anywhere. I was right there the whole time. And I think partially because I knew that this was my responsibility. I had set it up that way. Like this was all me. So I was focused and present intentionally, I think. And suddenly I could like feel something coming out. And I was like, oh, right before that, I felt like a caged animal. And I like stood up in the tub, and I put my hands against the wall, and I was like, I want to get out of here. Like, get me out of this thing. And Luke tried to help me over the edge, but another contraction came, and I just like dropped to my knees, and I was like, I can't get out. I can't do it. I was like, great. My fate is I'm just stuck in this pool now. So then, yeah, shortly after that is when I started to feel something. And I was just like, okay, you don't have to do anything here. Just breathe. This is happening. And I leaned against the back of the pool. I had both my arms out, and I was in kind of like a one-legged squat. And I just breathed, and I would feel the baby's head come, and I would feel myself open. And then when the contraction would end, it would go back up. And I got really quiet. Like I wasn't moaning anymore. It was like silence in the room. So silent that Luke went to sleep on the couch because he was like, we're going to be here for days. I've done this before. Sounds like she might be napping. Good night. And I didn't want to rush that. I was like, you don't need to push here. You don't need to do anything. Like, just let this happen. So it happened. Many, many contractions. Baby's head would, I didn't know it was baby's head. Something would come down, open me up. The contraction would end. It would go back up. And then I thought, okay, maybe I'll just kind of get behind one and see what happens. Then maybe the next time it'll come further out. And so I did that. I put like the teensiest little bit of hold at the end of the contraction, and it worked. Baby didn't go back up. I was like, oh, okay, cool. And then on the next contraction, baby came out, and I felt myself tear. And, but I didn't care. And so something was out of me, and I touched it. I hadn't touched yet, but I touched it, and it was like slimy and soft. And I was like, oh, and for the first time, I opened my eyes. And Luke, I saw him on the couch, and I was like, babe, you're missing it. And he's like, I'm right here, babe. And I was like, yeah, but you can't see what's coming out of my vagina. And my mother was like, something's coming out of your vagina. And they
And it's
I'm
dark right
"Oh."
now.
Yeah, it's totally dark. It's the middle of the night.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's totally dark. And so they come over to look and they can't see anything. And I say, well, use a light. And they both like flick on the lights. And I'm like, no, a flashlight. What are you doing? And they're like, it's a head. And I remember thinking, like, whatever, who cares if it's a head or a butt or an arm or anything? I don't care. It's coming. This is happening. And I'm not rushing it. And I felt the baby like squirming inside of me, which was awesome because I felt the baby many, many times while I was laboring. And that was so nice and reassuring. It was like, baby's alive. We're good. We're doing the damn thing. But I felt like a real squirming. So this could have been like the rotation that they talk about. But I thought she was kind of like kicking me inside. And I didn't know I was a girl either yet. And I was like, okay, I'm gonna move. I'm gonna get on my hands and knees now so you can come out. And I remember feeling that there was a cord around the neck. Like once I knew it was a head, I touched underneath and I remember feeling there was a cord and I was like, okay, mental note, there's a cord. I'm gonna have to unravel that. And then I just breathed a few more contractions and I had my hand kind of touching the head, and then relief, and out baby came. And I was like, okay, the cord, like it's tight. I have a video footage of this part, so I know what happened. I know what I said at least. And I say, oh, the cord, it's really, really tight. And the baby's in the water. And I gotta unloop it. But I can't like unloop it. And I'm like, okay, I'm gonna have to like swivel my baby around in the water to do this. And I'm like reaching behind me and I'm looking for the legs. And then I'm like, where are the legs? But the legs are inside of me. So I'm like, oh, the legs are inside of me. Better pull her out. Better pull baby out. And then I managed to like rotate the body and loop it off. And I was like, oh, twice. It's actually looped twice. So I got it off. And then I brought baby to my chest. And the baby was like a nice pink, good color, but not crying, not breathing, and just limp. And I was like, okay, like you're here, and brought baby up to my chest. And my mother was starting to panic because the baby wasn't breathing. So there's part in the video where I say to her, like, baby's been vigorous the whole time. Sometimes this just takes time. I'm not worried at all. I'm feeling super relaxed about it. And my baby's been kicking inside of me the whole time. Like, this is just a transition. Like, that's it. So I rub the baby and I talk to the baby, and minutes go by, and I think, well, maybe I'll like suction over the nose and the mouth, and I do that. And the baby starts doing this every so often. And I was like, okay, cool. Like reflexes are happening. Baby's trying to breathe. Like we're getting closer. We're moving more forward. And I still feel relaxed because the baby's a good color. I think that was a big part of it too. Baby was a good color. I was like, this looks like an oxygenated baby. We're good. And I, get loud. I talk loudly and I put the baby on my knees and kind of invert and rub the back. And it's like 7 minutes that goes by here. And right near the end of the 7-minute mark, start to be like, okay, this is like taking a while. I'm starting to like be panicked because I in all my research, I never read about that reflex. I never knew what that was. So that was like unknown, and I was scared and confused, but not like super scared, just a little bit scared. So I was like, Luke, Google newborn gasping. Like, tell me what this is. Luke is the worst Googler ever. God love him. And so shortly after he reads something to me, it's not what I want to hear, I ask my mother. And in the video, you can like hear the fear in my voice when I say mama. And so she turns off the camera and reads me something, but then the baby just starts crying. And so baby's crying, and I'm so happy, and my little baby's crying on me, and, um, that's I just look at the body, and eventually I realize, like, it's a girl, and I'm like, "Oh my god, it's a girl," and I'm so excited because I have a girl, and I'm, like, kind of afraid of having a boy. I'm really happy to be a girl mom, and I love, the female presence and women, and, like, I'm gonna raise some women, and so I'm super excited about that, and oh, it was just, like, so peaceful and beautiful and lovely, and I asked what time it was 5 o'clock in the morning when she was born, and, that was when she took her first breath, 5 o'clock. I think maybe 5:03. Mm, and that's it, we're all just listening to her cry and saying hello, and, eventually I wanna get out of the water, so we do that little dance, and someone holds her, they hold me, it's awkward and uncomfortable, and, we walk over to the bed and we get in bed, and then the sun comes up, and then about an hour later, her sister wakes up, um, and my placenta is not born, and
Okay.
I'm having, like, wild after
Mm,
pains,
mhm.
like, you know, more feels like more intense than labor, super, super painful. And I'm like, okay. So I try to squat and I try a bowl, and I have my sister come and pick up my daughter. And so she feeds her breakfast and takes her away. So, and then, kind of hours go by and my placenta is not coming.
Mm.
And again, I'm like not too worried. I think about how do I feel, and I feel good. I've already eaten something. I think I had like a banana and some coconut water, like within 15 minutes of the birth. Um, and then I had breakfast a little bit later. So I feel good. I'm just tired and I'm not bleeding too much. And my placenta is not coming. And as the hours go by, the after pains stop. I do everything I can think of. I think at the 5 hour mark, I'm like, maybe I need to be alone. Let's cut the cord. We had planned, I had like a burning box, but
Uh-huh.
we just tied it with some string and cut it with some sterilized scissors. And I looked at the cord. I knew to like see how many little blood vessels there were. So I was like, cord looks good. Baby looks good. Things are good. Everything's good. It's just, again, the clock, the clock, the clock, the clock. It's been 5 hours. It's been 6 hours. It's been 7 hours. I tried uterine massage. I got in the tub. I tried sitting on the toilet. I tried squatting. I tried pulling. And I can feel this like lump. When I lay on my back, there's like a big hard lump. And I'm like, oh my God, is there like another malformed baby in there? Like, what? My brain is going all kinds of
Totally.
places. And yeah, and I just wait. And I reached out to like some friends, a birth worker friend of mine who's very wise. And she was like, eventually, as the day went on, she's like, have you slept? And I was like, no, I haven't slept. And it was like almost nighttime again. Because I was just focused, get this thing out of me. Like, what can I do? Is there something emotionally I haven't cleared? Like, I went through the whole list of all the things that you can possibly do. Um, and my placenta was not detached. Like when I pulled on that cord, it pulled that hard mass down my belly. So, but I was like, what if the C-section, if they did some stitching random places in my uterus, like maybe it's grown into it and it can't detach. Like, I went all kinds of places in my head. And every hour that went by, I was just like, I'm not ready to go to the hospital. This is not how I want my free birth to end. I know what they're going to do. They're going to give me Pitocin. They're going to aggressively massage my belly, and they're going to rip my placenta out and maybe cause me to hemorrhage. And I don't want that. So if the only problem is time, we're going to stay. I'm good for another hour. And that was it. I just checked in every hour. Am I good for another hour? Am I good for another hour? And I was good. And then I went to sleep and I slept for a couple hours. And when I woke up, baby started nursing. And as baby nurse for like an hour. And as she nursed, the after pains started coming back, and they came back, and they're more frequent, and they're more intense, and they're more intense. And I was like, okay, I have to poop. Like, somebody help me to the bathroom. So I stood up from my bed, and Luke helped me walk, the short 20 feet to the bathroom. And I sat down on the toilet, and I was like, okay, I'm going to poop with this next contraction. And then I went and into the toilet.
Oh my God.
Dropped my placenta, and I was like, yes.
Okay, I have
Like,
so many questions.
it
What?
was 11:30 at night.
Oh my God. See, and so would you say all you needed was some rest and some nursing time?
I don't know. Is it because I was in the water? Is it because we turned the lights on after she started breathing? Is it because my baby got up and I had to play mama for a few
Mm,
minutes?
mm,
Is it because I didn't sleep yet? Is it because I did have like vascular issues there because of scars in my C-section? I don't know.
mm,
I really don't know.
mm.
I think it could be any of those things, and I don't care which one it was.
Yeah,
That's
but
like
it
part
plopped
of it.
out right into the toilet.
Yeah, it did. And it's a wild beast. It's a crazy,
Oh my
crazy
God.
looking placenta. It has like a fat edge and a really thin edge, and it's nuts. But I had prepared like a salted herbal situation because my original plan was to either lotus birth or burn the cord, or I wanted to keep my options open to whatever worked, but what ended up working was to like just cut it. So I put it in a bowl full of salt and rosemary and lavender. Those are my herbs of choice. And I just left it because I needed to like go to bed and you know see my other child. She ended up sleeping the night at her auntie's house because I still hadn't birthed my placenta by the time her bedtime came around. So um and then the next day I like took it out and examined it, and did a video, and sent it to a midwife that I know and a birth worker that I know to kind of get their thoughts. And they had some like cool things to say. My one friend, Kate, who's been a birth worker outside the system for a long time, um, her mentor is Sister Morningstar. And so she sent pictures to Sister Morningstar and they talked about it. And I remember her telling me, she's like, it's really mammalian. Like, it doesn't look like a human placenta. It looks like a wild animal's placenta. And I laughed and I was like, amazing.
That's so
Um,
cool. And to have Sister Morningstar look at it, what an honor.
yeah, I know. So amazing. So amazing. I'm really blessed in the birth world as far as who I've been able to connect with. I think it's, yeah, so beautiful. Kate, she's just such a wealth of knowledge. She was like the one that really kept me steady the whole time I was waiting for my placenta to come. She texted with me all day long. So grateful for her. I love her so much. She does a course called A Witch's Awakening, Womancraft, and it's sold by Freebirth Society. And they actually have a sale going on every year around Halloween or Samhain, to like re-release the course. And I think you can get it for like $100. I've purchased it. It's amazing. She's amazing. She's at your local midwitch on Instagram.
How is postpartum for you following that?
And postpartum is sweet. It's my second time around, and both births I really prepared for a well supported postpartum. So um I asked my mother to commit to living in my home for a full month, a full 4 weeks after I gave birth. And she was gracious enough to do that. She's amazing. This woman like birthed 8 babies herself, and she's just been the best grandmother and such an awesome postpartum support. So she lived in my home and helped care for my toddler. My partner took 4 months off work after I had my baby. We're in Canada, so we have really good government programs that allow us actual time to be parents that are supported with government finances. So I had a full over 6 months of money, like financial support from the government. He took 4 months then, and then he took another 16 weeks, 8 months later, 8 months, no, a year later, so that I could go back to work and he could come and full-time parent. So we were very well supported, both financially and physically, with a live-in person. And all I got to do as mother was like, my only job was connect with your new baby. And that was awesome. I don't think I really left my bed very much for, almost a month. I would just go to the bathroom and back.
So I tore when I free birthed, and
Oh,
you mentioned it as well. And for me, I think it was that same sensation where it went through my mind. It was like, I was amazed that like, hey, I don't feel like I have to push. Like during this moment when Bjorn was crowning, I was like, I don't feel an urge, but I wanted to because I wanted to get him out and meet him. Right. Well, I didn't know he was a he at the time, but yeah. And so I just really like, oh, and then, I didn't even know that I tore. But I did. And so how was that for you? Like, I didn't really know how to navigate that until, I had some RBK friends saying like pee in like a warm towel, because it did burn quite a bit. And then I think at the 2 week mark, like right on the dot 2 weeks, it was completely like, it felt fine. It didn't burn anymore to pee. I felt healed, even though, it looks different now, but it was completely healed at 2 weeks. What about for you?
yes, it looks different forever.
Yeah. Because I feel like women don't really talk about it. I feel like it's kind of avoided, but it's the reality.
Yeah, and it's actually beautiful.
Mhm.
Because we're reborn, right? All of us is reborn when we become mothers, whether it's the first time, second time, third time, or 20th time. Those poor women, the 20th baby. Anyways, I would say what I had was a 3rd-degree tear. It was like big and deep. And it was kind of at the same angle that they would cut an episiotomy. So that was really interesting to see that that's where my body decided to tear. And
because with an episiotomy, I don't really know much. Would they go vertical or they cut horizontal?
They don't go vertical. They cut like on a downward angle. I think that's what I think I know. Yeah, a downward angle. So I could see the inside of my body now that this was open. And I have to say, if I had somebody who I trusted to come to my house and stitch my tear, because it was so deep, and then like just say congratulations on your baby and goodbye, maybe I'll come back and check on you in a little bit, it's possible that I would have explored saying yes to that option. But I don't have anyone in my life like that. And any kind of engagement with the medical system, I know what it comes with. It's like all kinds of like just gross energy around my sovereign choices to birth my baby on my terms. And I just wasn't interested in any of that. And I was like, whatever. Women haven't had their yonis stitched for millennia, so we're good. And we'll just see how this goes. It wasn't super painful. I think maybe only 3 days of pain. And I used a peri bottle. So I would just like fill it with warm water. And it's just a little plastic bottle with a squirt top. And I would squirt that on my vagina as I would be peeing. I actually learned that trick in the hospital with my first baby. The warm water, it felt nice. Anytime I would like need to have a bowel movement, I would hold a wet warm cloth on my perineum, which also just like helped release my poop. But I didn't have any like issues with that postpartum. It was just happening normally and well. I just rested, right? Like I just needed rest, and so I did that, and it's never closed. Like I know there's sort of this thing about like it will heal and close on its own. That was not my experience. And I rested for a month and I took it really easy. And I mean, I looked, maybe that's why I didn't close. Like, I wanted to see what was going on. I was like taking pictures every day. I was interested in the process. And I also was like, I was just free bleeding. I just had like a waterproof mat on my bed and a soft blanket on top of that we would change out 2 or 3 times a day. And I would just, yeah, naked and free bleeding.
Can you share with the foods you were eating, the nourishing foods that maybe your mom was making for you? Because you're a chef, so I want to know what you enjoyed having.
Yeah, well, when I was pregnant with Chloe, we bought a deep freeze because like having food prepared for being a new mother was a big deal for me. So again, during my pregnancy, I made meals and stocked my freezer. But my mom's also a great cook. So she would just and Luke too. Luke's a great cook, so they would just cook for me. I bought the book The First 40 Days to give them kind of a guideline of like how to prepare nourishing foods. But basically, like I requested that by 6 a.m. a warm bowl of porridge be brought to me in my room. And the way we did it was like I slept in the bed with the baby and Luke slept on the couch so that he could sleep all night so that he could be available for our toddler during the day. And I would be able to take naps. And we also wanted my mother to have uninterrupted sleep. So yeah, porridge first thing in the morning. And like by 6 a.m., I'm ravenous. Even though when I go to bed, I have a full tray of food next to me. Like, the baby's cycle is awake at night and asleep during the day for at least the first week in my experience. And I loved that. And then it was just like stews. I think I have an Instagram post where I wrote one day all of the things that I ate in the day, and it's like 6 bowls of stew, tons of fruit, lots of tea and drinks, and like, yeah, just all the stews and all the soups. So really easily digestible things. Another thing that I really contended with in the first week after I had the baby was like my organs are moving, right? My bellies were so big and my poor organs are just like so smushed. And it was actually painful to eat. As the food would go through my digestive system, I felt lots of discomfort and pain. And that happened in both of my births. So I made sure to eat really easily digestible foods, lots of soups and stews, slow cooked things. I'm really picky about where I source my food. I'm like a big farmer's market girl, and I have an uncle who it's a generational farm. It's been in our family since the 1800s, and it's all like pasture raised meats now. So that's what my freezer's full of. So food is my life. So I've really built my life around sourcing excellent, like high density, nourishing foods and cooking with them. So I was very, very well nourished. They would bring me meals in my room 3-4 times a day. I think I had to eat every couple hours or else I was like shaky. So I ate so much food. I was also breastfeeding both babies still.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, my toddler was still breastfeeding. She was only 18 months.
Yeah. Okay, so did you breastfeed your baby and your firstborn at the same time?
Yes, I have tandem nursed probably less than 20 times, and I despise it.
Okay.
I hate the feeling. I can't connect with either of them. I feel like a milk machine, but then I visited this farm recently and there was this like mama pig with 20 little piglets, like all nursing at the same time. And she was just like laying there. I was like, man, these mothers, like what we go through.
Seriously.
It's just the sacrifice that you have to just, it's part of it. You just give just give to this new life, and they just need so much from you. It's really intense.
Yeah, I mean, I feel so much joy that you were so well taken care of and nourished. And it's funny because I feel like I'm on the other spectrum. I've never been so depleted and okay, malnourished might be too much, but to say, but postpartum, like I I didn't meal train. I mean, I didn't really have any close friends in town. I didn't prepare, on cooking and freezing it. I didn't have my mom because she was still in Thailand, even though she wanted to come, but um I didn't want anyone around because everyone was just against me free birthing. And so I just wanted to protect that energy and not have anyone and not be open to that. I mean, I did have my mom-in-law come 2 weeks later, but still that was just weird, and her just tiptoeing around and not.
Why didn't you prepare?
I don't know. I just thought we got this. My husband can cook, when I'm hungry.
Yeah.
I was just, not well prepared. And I definitely learned from that.
Yeah. We knew how intense it is for the husband already because we went through that with Chloe. They need support too because you're the mother and you lean on them so much in so many ways that they need someone to lean on. They need someone to take care of them too because it's just too much. It's like too much to ask of one person to be all of those things.
Yeah, absolutely. Things are going to be so different for the next time around.
Yeah, I mean that's the gift of not feeling the best, right? It makes you make different choices in the future. That's the gift of things going wrong. It's just a fire to make the shift.
Totally.
Yeah.
So anything else you want to share postpartum?
Yeah, I would love to share a little bit about the placenta.
Yes.
Because so it's a very strange shape, and you can see I have a highlight on my Instagram reels, or no, a highlight on my Instagram stories that is about my free birth. And at the end, you'll see like videos of my placenta and pictures. And I've had a few people look at it, and what they've said is that potentially I had two babies, that I was pregnant with twins of some kind.
Whoa.
And that one of those babies was absorbed by the other or didn't make it to term or whatever. And two separate midwives told me that. So Sister Morningstar's like comment about it being like a wild animals was also about it being multiples, because animals typically have more than one, right? It's very rare for them to gestate just one. And I just have to say, like, had I had a scan and then I knew there was two and then one of them doesn't make it, I would have been so devastated, and then I maybe wouldn't have free birthed. And but I just like the gift of the mystery of not knowing and of just like opening yourself to the possibility of things and enjoying the way that things unfold. That was one of them. That was a major one for me because I can't, I had like the most blissful experience, and I can't even imagine what it would have been like had I had that information. And also I want to talk about my baby's transition and how long it took, and how she's now a year and a half. So I have a pretty good idea of her mental capacities as I compare them with her sister. Nothing's wrong with her. She's like speaking much earlier than all the other kids in daycare. She's vibrant. She's not brain damaged. What I want to say, really, because there's this like great concern that, oh, if the baby's not screaming and breathing right away, they're not getting enough oxygen and they're going to be brain damaged. And if I had a medical provider there, what would have happened is they would have almost immediately cut the cord, which takes her oxygen supply away from her because she is being oxygenated before she breathes from the blood in her cord. And they would have taken her away from me, which would have triggered all kinds of crazy responses in me, loads of adrenaline, loads of fear, and also a recurring like regurgitation of the trauma of my first daughter being taken away from me before I touched her. And I think that would have been a very scary situation for me. And I think that I possibly would not have survived that. And I think my daughter possibly would not have survived being taken away and resuscitated. So these are the gifts of the free birth for me. Nobody rushed us. Nobody interrupted. Nobody got in the way. Nobody caused the problem by trying to save us. And we're great. So I'm super grateful for that.
Wow, that is so valuable.
And in fact, if I had someone there, it probably would have caused big problem. Actually, one of our RBK sisters, who's an ex-NHS midwife, after she saw the footage of my birth, she sent me a message and said, if you had any kind of licensed practitioner there, they would have been freaking out. And I was like, yeah, good to know. Thank God I didn't.
Mm-hmm.
It'd be really interesting to start to like take note of all of these free birth stories to see what the real spectrum of normal actually looks like. Because we really only have data and statistics from highly managed situations with practitioners who are forced to act and interfere because of fear of losing their licensure or being held accountable in a court of law for not doing what they're supposed to do. So I really hope that somewhere in this revolution, there's a scientist among us who wants to start documenting and, taking meticulous records, because I think that's going to be a really important part of this birth revolution that you and I are both a part of.
Yeah, and I think it's absolutely helpful that you're sharing your story, so another woman who hears that, your baby didn't breathe for 7 minutes, it's a testament that it's okay, that it happens.
Yeah, and if I was in a hospital, it would have been like, oh, the baby would have died if I wasn't there. Because that's such a huge narrative, like, oh, I needed to be there because otherwise the baby would have died. I'm just here to share my story. She didn't die. She's fine. She's perfect.
Is there any resources you would recommend to other women who are considering a VBAC or who want to free birth or are considering not birthing in a hospital and wanting to have a home birth?
If you want to have a VBAC, I really recommend working on your scar. Whether that's actually doing anything physically or not, this like loving touch to that space and the knowledge that I made a point to tend physically and energetically to that space was a major part of me feeling confidence to have a VBAC. I don't have a ton of advice for people who are going to have a VBAC under a midwife or an obstetrician, except to say, do not let them give you Pitocin. Force your provider to allow you a natural birth. Drugs are dangerous all the time, but I think especially when it comes to a womb that has undergone the trauma of being cut open. And listen to stories. Listen to lots of stories. The Freebirth Society podcast is full of amazing, beautiful birth and power stories, some of which are VBACs, some of which are even like vaginal birth after 2 cesareans. There are other VBAC podcasts out there. There's a ton of resources. Do not take your care provider's word for anything. Do the work yourself. Wrap your head around this stuff. Find information from different avenues. The obstetricians think a little bit differently than the midwives think, a little bit differently than the birth workers outside the system. Check out the work of Michel Audin. He's actually a male French obstetrician. Check out the work of Dr. Sarah Buckley. Follow some good accounts on Instagram. Wapio, Sister Morningstar. Like, find your grounding and face your fears. That's a huge one. You have to face your fears, and you have to understand what it is that you're doing. And you have to get right with how you feel about death and how you feel about things going wrong and how you want, when things to go wrong, to look. Okay? Because for me, if my baby was born still, I had thought about that, and I had come to terms with that, and I had decided what I would want that to look like. If my baby was born still, I wanted to still be at home and to still be in my house and with my family. And of course, it's a traumatic and horrible experience. But I had to think about that. And we all have to contend with the fact that we are bringers of life. We live in the veil when we are pregnant and we are approaching the birthing time. And the veil is not separate from the realm of death. It's right there. It's so connected. Life and death and rebirth are all part of the same swirl. We don't get to pretend that we get to control what's going on. We don't get to pretend that we get to decide who lives and who dies. We have to sit in the mystery of that and open ourselves and be vulnerable and decide how we want it to look, no matter what happens.
I want to cry hearing you talk about all that. I'm so happy for you, Rosemary. I'm so grateful to have you share your story.
Yeah, my pleasure. It's always healing. It's always healing. Every time I talk about it, every time I tell my story, it changes me.
How can we find you? Where can we find you? I know you have a podcast.
Yeah, so the Rose Medicine podcast was just released in late October 2022. You can check it out on Spotify or Apple Podcasts, maybe Google Podcasts too. It's called the Rose Medicine Podcast. And you can find me on Instagram at rosemedicine.love.
You can see her giving birth to Amelie on her Instagram as well. And a badass reel. We'll leave that up as a little surprise. Go check it out.
Thank you.
Thank you, Rose.